Good morning.
Hello.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on the webinar this morning. I'm just having a little look at our viewers list to see how many people we've got joining us this morning. We'll just wait a minute or so for some additional joiners, some additional viewers, and then we'll begin the webinar. There is a question already up in the poll just to see. So you can check the poll functionality to see how it's working. So if you wanted to have a little look and answer that question, just to check that you can, and then we'll start in a minute or two. We can see the poll. Okay, good morning, everybody. I think that's a resounding the weather is horrible with all of us.
We can do better than this. Come on.
Hopefully so. So hopefully we can bring a little bit of sunshine to you today, wherever you are, with our conversation about e-learning and about how we can really sort of create engagement by making the right choices in what we do in our e-learning design. So I'm Sophie Tilley. I'm a learning designer with Walkgrove, and also presenting with me this morning is my colleague Rosie Scott.
Hello, good morning. I'm Rosie. I'm also a learning designer at Walkgrove.
So we'll be talking to a lot of people this morning. We've also got another one of our colleagues, Alan Samuel, who will be taking us through some of the questions at the end of the session. Do you want to say a quick hello, Alan?
Yes, hi everyone. Good morning. Welcome.
Gonna go with a no. He's quite
shy. So yeah, if you can fire away your questions through the presentation, I'll just collate them all and then we'll pick them up at the end if that's fine.
Yeah, that's grand. Okay, so we'll kick off. You're on to the first screen. Okay, so the overarching idea for the webinar that we want to present today is about box ticking in e-learning. So when we walk into a sweet shop and we see all the delicious things that are on offer on the shelves, it can be very tempting to say, yeah, I'll have some of all of that. I want some from jar A, jar B, I want some jelly babies, some jazzy, some sherbet, I want all of it. And then when you get the sweets home, you realise that nobody that you wanted to share the sweets with actually likes jelly babies, but you've got a whole bag full of them. So it's about making the right decisions at the right time for your audience. So we're going to be talking about the elements that we can include, why you should include them, and best practice for the inclusion of those elements. So we'll move on to the first slide. So I think it's fair to say, as a kind of an overarching theme, and I'm sure that Rosie will agree with me here, is that what we like to do at Walkgrove is we always like to put the learner first, and that's kind of the driving factor behind this webinar this morning, is how can we constantly put the learner at the centre of everything we do to make sure that it's really what they want and what they need.
Yep, and the first thing that we need to do, obviously, for that is to identify who the audience are. So we'll start by talking about that a little bit. We want to really encourage you to think about the type of media that you're choosing and making sure that it's really going to be working for your particular audience, not just including elements because they look good or because you've used them before, but starting by really thinking about the audience. So the first thing that we're going to say is we often the first question that's asked is, what do learners need to know to get the job done? But we want to think about, instead of saying that, to maybe say, what do learners need to do? And a secondary question to that might be, what do they need to know? So we'll start by asking, what do they need to do? And then finding out why are they not doing it? And then from that, we'll be able to find out what they need to know to then do their job better.
When people come to us to start to develop an e-learning course, often the first question that people have, as Rosie's pointed out, is usually, well, this is what we need our learners to know. This is a new process, a new product that we need them to understand. And whilst that is a great question to ask, and it's the foundation of building a really good e-learning course, what we want to do is we need to ask about best fit first. So how can I communicate the information most effectively? We already know what the information is. It's how we do that. Sorry, I'm just getting a message that
you may be muted your microphone.
I'm getting a message that my
I can hear you in my headphones now, so that might be better. Can people hear Sophie now?
Can everyone hear me? Okay, that's better. That's great. Thank you. So as I was just saying, so the temptation is to say, what knowledge do we need to convey? The better question, as Rosie's just said, is how to communicate this information most effectively. And not that we want to do ourselves out of a job at this point. Rosie and I are a little nervous about this. But e-learning may not be the best option. It may not be the best solution for your learners. It can be extremely effective, and as we hope to show during the webinar, it is a solution which has many, many benefits. But when you ask, how can I communicate with my learners best? The answer that you may get might not be e-learning. It may be that there is another option. And to that end, I think Rosie's going to set up another poll.
So with that in mind, yes, we will start the first real poll, and we're just going to ask you, what do you think is the main reason for choosing an e-learning solution? And be honest now, is it the time that it takes to produce an e-learning as opposed to a face-to-face training or some other kind of solution? Is it the cost, or is it because it's the best solution for the audience? So we'll have a think, and then hopefully we'll be able to see the results soon. Right, and okay, so our results of the poll are showing us that most of you have selected e-learning as the best solution for the audience. And of course, that may very well be the case in a lot of cases, and as Sophie said, we don't want to do ourselves out of a job. E-learning is often an excellent solution and can help you to reach a wide range of people, and Also, it is worth noting, is relatively low cost and takes a relatively short amount of time to produce. So if we're honest, e-learning is often chosen because it's cheap and quick, and sometimes may not be the best solution for the audience. For example, if you are introducing a systems training, if you want to teach people how to use a new system and your audience is young and tech savvy, is e-learning going to be the best solution in that case? The fact is, it may not be. Your audience have probably seen hundreds of different data input forms before, and they know how to use them without being taken through it step by step in an e-learning format, which is going to be it is going to force them to do things in a particular way. It may just be better to stick them on a dummy system and let them have a play around so that they can then work out how to use the system. However, there are other situations where e-learning may be the best option. For example, if you have a very wide audience, and for example, if you're introducing a new policy to the whole company, then you're going to have a wide audience and e-learning could really work for you. However, it is always best to try and identify the audience as far as possible. You may say the audience is far too big. We're not going to be able to know anything about them really. However, there are lots of things that you can do to try and know your learner better. So we'll look at some of those now. If I can go. Presentation's working for me now. Sorry.
It's all about asking the right questions. So how do we go about identifying what it is that our learners want? As we've mentioned before, e-learning isn't always the best solution. Perhaps if there's a very practical skill that you need to demonstrate to people, then perhaps a blended solution where face-to-face training is complemented by underpinning knowledge provided by an e-learning course. But the crucial place to start is finding out about your audience, asking those key questions that are going to really help you connect with them in the long term. So if you are responsible for commissioning e-learning as part of your wider role, or if you're looking for a company to work with on e-learning, it's what we would advocate always, to start off by asking the learners what it is they need and want. So there are a couple of ways that you can do that. First of all, the best and simplest way to find out what somebody wants is to ask them. Rosie, do you want a cup of tea?
Never say no.
There you go. See, it's very easy for us to say, oh, I'm not going to ask, I'm just going to make assumptions. And that is usually what leads to our downfall. So first of all, get a survey out there. Talk to your learners. Who are your typical learners? Who are the people who are going to be engaging with this material? Ask them what they want. So what do they like or dislike about previous e-learning experiences? How much time have they got? Where are they going to be taking the e-learning? What kind of environment? Will they be sitting at home on their iPad, or is it the 5 or 10 minutes that they can get together during a break time or a lunch time? What ways are they going to be interacting with the learning? As Rosie mentioned earlier, are they tech savvy? Does the idea of having to do an e-learning course on an iPad absolutely terrify them, or is it something that they would really like and get into? One of the points we've got here is what do they do already online? Do they use social media? Do they like videos or podcasts? What kind of material are they going to respond to well? So finding out about who they are and how they already interact with material is really going to help you target your course to make it really bespoke for your audience. And again, that's one of the good points about coming to a company like Walkgrove. We create bespoke courses. So we're not just going to be churning out the same old. We're going to take the information that we take from these surveys and what our learners really want, and then tailor exactly the right approach for them. So surveys find out what your learners want, and a diagnostic assessment can help you to find out what your learners actually need. So we're just trying to bring up the information about that now. But a diagnostic assessment is more of a test or an example where you find out what it is that your learners already know and identify gaps in learner knowledge. So, for example, you could want to deliver an e-learning course to your learners and just assume that they don't know anything about the subject. However, a diagnostic assessment can highlight the areas where they're already very experienced and then highlight those areas where they need a little bit of help. The benefit of that is that you're really going to target key areas rather than trying to create a cover-all. Secondly, it's very easy to disenfranchise learners. If we're talking to an experienced audience about something that they can already do, it's very easy to create sort of a switch off. So a diagnostic assessment will signpost you to what your learners really need to work on, and that maximises your time, it maximises your budget and your resources, and it prevents you from sort of over egging the subject with an audience who is already extremely experienced.
And it's just getting away from that thing of treating all of your audience as if they're the same person, because some people might say that it's a weakness of e-learning, that it's not targeted enough, you can't have that kind of face-to-face interaction with your learner. But if you find out who they are, and if you allow them to then take control of their own learning in the way that a diagnostic assessment might allow them to, as in some of them might know some things, some of them might know other things. Diagnostic assessment's going to tell you that, and you're going to be able to allow people to just skip straight to what they need to know. And in that way, you avoid treating them all as if they're the same person with the same level of experience and making them all start from zero, which slightly insults their intelligence as well, because obviously we're dealing with intelligent adults who've probably been doing this for quite a while, and we don't want to waste their time. We want to help them.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know about you, Rosie, but I mean, I always feel better when I feel like I've got a level of autonomy in my learning. I feel like I'm, as you said, being sort of treated like a grown-up. So,
and that's one of the great things about e-learning. It can be so self-paced, and we can put it exactly where the learner needs it, when they need it, in terms of mobile learning, in terms of just being able to access a course wherever and whenever you want to. And that's why it's really great and really flexible in that way.
So, having covered how we then go about finding out what our learners want, we assume that we've done the survey, we've done the diagnostic assessment, we've gathered all of this really useful data into what our learners want and need. So then we move on to actually creating the course. And this brings us back to sort of the sweet shop analogy that I was talking about earlier. It's very tempting when we're in the initial phases of creating an e-learning course to say, we'd like everything, please. We'd like quizzes, we'd like animations, we'd like it on
3D and
we like
videos,
it on mobile, and we want our learners to be able to do it whilst being on a pogo stick, and just everything we can possibly throw at it.
These are all great things,
yes,
and they are all things that Walkgrove can do for you, no problem whatsoever. But what we're saying is choose the right ones.
Yes, we're
a bit now
advocating sort of choice, the right choice. So the first thing we're going to look at is end of course quizzes. Now, quizzes are something that are used frequently throughout e-learning modules. That can be extremely useful when put to the right use. So let's take a little look now. We've got another poll.
Yes, let's have another little poll. So what do you guys think? Is it necessary to include a quiz or assessment at the end of a course? Yes, always. Yes, if we need to prove learners have understood, or no. The poll's just gone out, and we will wait and have a little look at the results. Oh, look at that. It's a fairly even split between all three options. And I think that is that's fair. They're sort of all true in a way.
It's fairly indicative, isn't it?
We often do include an assessment so that we have something to show that learners have been paying attention, and it may be that we have to show that to prove that the training has worked and that prove that the money was invested wisely. And yes, quizzes can be very, very useful if they're done in the right way. But we are also suggesting that there may be better ways of measuring knowledge uptake. So let's maybe have a look at some of those now. So we'll start by looking at multiple choice questions.
I think one of the key reasons that people feel the need to include multiple choice quizzes, and I think that's come up as sort of part of the result of the poll, is that we feel like we constantly need to be checking that the learners have got the message, that it's all sort of filtered in and they understand what we've been trying to tell them. But what can quizzes really tell us? What is the benefit of making the learner answer a multiple choice question, which, if we're honest, distractors can usually be difficult to think of, and sometimes we're signposting the right answer by putting distractors in anyway. But let's think about this. What does a quiz really tell us? So that a learner can parrot back what we've taught them, that they have really good short-term memories, and that they can pass a quiz. What can we do with that information ultimately?
What we're obviously trying to do when we're asking multiple choice questions is to try and let learners apply what we're trying to teach them and show that they'll then be able to do it when they have to apply it to their job. But how often does it happen in your job that someone comes up to you and says, here are the steps in a process, can you put them in the correct order? And that just doesn't happen. What you need to know, what you need to show is that the learner is going to, when they're carrying out the process, think to themselves, yep, okay, I know what the next thing I have to do is, and they're going to be able to do it in the context of their job. So we need to be trying to test long-term application of knowledge, not just memory.
And very rarely in anything I do am I given 3 options to choose from. There are either more options than I can possibly cope with, or I have to be responsible for generating those options myself. And it's in doing that that we can practically apply the knowledge that we've gained.
Right.
But no small task in an e-learning environment. We do appreciate that.
The fact is that multiple choice questions are often used because they can be tracked by the LMS or something like that. And obviously that's a strength of them. But as we have said, they do have their weaknesses. They can oversimplify content, as Sophie was saying. And we can sometimes alleviate that problem by including scenarios, which slightly help to apply the knowledge to a particular context. But again, if we're using mini scenarios, we need to be sure and make sure that they're not too complex. And though they do help to put learning into context. And the other thing is that multiple choice questions can't really test something such as behavior change or soft skills. So we need to use a different approach there, and trying to fit a multiple choice question in there isn't really going to work. But there are luckily lots of creative ways around that.
So, as we said before, applying knowledge in real world scenarios is a really great test of whether somebody has picked up the information. So setting real world tasks, either as a part of a blended solution or face-to-face training, or simulated scenarios within the e-learning environment to check that the learner has taken on board what you've told them and then can apply them to a practical or decision-making situation.
Exactly. And where, for example, we're saying set some real world tasks rather than doing it in an e-learning environment, where again, we're not trying to do ourselves out of a job. There are learning aids that can be used alongside the real world tasks that can be produced and designed by Walkgrove or similar companies. but they are going to be what is best for the learner, rather than trying to force them into this multiple choice e-learning environment that isn't going to test whatever it is that we're trying to test, for example, if it was something like soft skills.
And whilst we understand that there are sort of levels of compliance that need to be met, oftentimes you need to be able to show a paper trail, an audit trail, that your learners are achieving a certain amount. What does 75% really tell you about a learner's capability? It shows that they can sit down and that they can answer questions. Does it tell you that they've actually grasped the fundamentals and understood how to apply them? Not necessarily. So as we're saying, we're advocating the use of real world scenarios in order to try and really apply that knowledge and make sure that it's being put to use.
And as Sophie was saying, you can use your LMS just to track kind of how many questions someone got correctly, but does knowing that they managed to get 75% in the assessment really tell you that they can now do the job properly? But then luckily there are lots of other features now on LMSs that will allow you to have question level tracking and allow you to have more detailed data that's going to tell you more about whether learners can apply the knowledge and whether they actually do understand it, or if they've just remembered it from what you told them a few minutes ago. So perhaps the data is telling you that learners seem to have grasped the fundamentals, but they're having more difficulty with questions that then show that they can apply them. So that might give you further guidance and say, okay, well, maybe we need some on-the-job guides for those particular types of things, or some tip sheets. And again, that's something that you can come to Walkgrove for, and we can help you, because you're really at that point going to have targeted what the problem is and going to be able to help learners when they need it.
And they will really thank you for that, for targeting the learning to something that they're struggling with, rather than creating sort of general wash that kind of only touches a little bit on the things that they really, really need. Oh, we've got a question.
Oh,
okay, I think we
look at a question.
Perhaps we'll, if it's relevant to this section, we might just stop and
oh, it's not popping up for me. Oh, on the chat. Oh, okay.
Let's have a little look.
What LMS do you suggest works best?
That's a huge question, and as with many things, there are lots of different LMSs on the market. So it's really about what you need for your business. There are huge LMSs that can cope with thousands of learners and user profiles, or there are lots of different sort of smaller packages. As a Walkgrove, as a Walkgrover, I would always recommend Svelte. Partly because of the setup costs, the budget considerations, but also because of the flexibility that you can have in Svelte. The best thing to do is to talk to companies like Walkgrove about your requirements. How many learners have you got? What kind of functionality do you need in your LMS? How much do you need to track? What do you need to know about your learners? What kind of complex content are you looking to get out of it? But if you are new to using an LMS, we could highly recommend using Svelte to get sort of an entry-level understanding of LMSs and how you can use it to the best advantage for your business. I hope that answers your question.
I think the other thing to remember is that the data that you get from an LMS should be seen more as your starting point than your end point. If you see that everyone has got 75% or more on the assessment, you might think, okay, well, job done, everyone understands it. However, if you've used your question level tracking, if you've used a more complex LMS that's going to give you more information, you will then see this is actually the starting point. Learners know this, this, and this, but they don't necessarily understand these other more complex points. So then we can provide more training, more learning aids, etc., to help with those things.
Yeah. And I think that's also down to sort of.
Oh, someone has said that they missed the name of the Walkgrove LMS. It's called Svelte.
Svelte. And again, that's I think what you're saying there, Rosie, as well, is it's down to sort of overall expectation as well. If 75%, we understand that there are targets and that there are expectations, especially from a compliance point of view, but 75% score doesn't necessarily mean that that information's really gone in and it's been used and developed. So just achieving numerical targets doesn't always transfer into success in the workplace. So there are additional things that we can do to make sure that that 75% isn't just a number, it's actually a practically applied understanding of the knowledge.
Yep, exactly. So now I'm going to try and move us on if the presentation decides it wants to play ball.
So we're looking again at, we're back to the Sweetie Shop, delving into the different things that we can put into our pick and mix for our e-learning, getting very excited about the different things that we can take. What's your favourite pick and mix sweet, Rosie?
I'm not really into sweets. I'd just go straight to the chocolates and not hurling them into my face.
Interesting, I like it. Sorry, that was an aside. I haven't had any breakfast. I don't know if you can tell.
We should do another poll.
Yes, have we had breakfast today? So again, something else we can choose. Graphics are a really important part of any e-learning course, and it can be very tempting to let's say use words that we're very familiar with. We'd like the course to look shiny, we'd like the course to look sexy, the course needs to look good, and whilst we agree with all of that, and we would we like to believe that all the courses we produce at Walkgrove have really high visual polish and finish, there are reasons to choose certain elements over others. So that they are just as important as text, providing really great graphics, and they do a lot more than just look good. The question we need to ask when including a graphical element into a course is, what do they actually mean? So what are we achieving with the graphic? So as well as setting the tone for the course, so they can either give a really sort of highly polished professional look to the course, they can also add emotional value. So if we're trying to let the learner connect with an emotional topic or issue, it can help give context to a story or a piece of information. So we can surround the text of the course with really powerful graphics to add context, location, and even sort of a situational analysis. It can set a scene, as I've just said, or demonstrate a complex idea in a more simple or easy to digest way. So providing something like an infographic or a well-positioned graph or chart, a picture says 1,000 words, as it's rightly said. So we can condense really complex and really tough information into more palatable elements of graphics.
Yeah, so when we're coming up with graphics as instructional designers, we try to think of every single graphic that we include as an opportunity. And yes, that's an opportunity to make the course look good, but most importantly, it's an opportunity for us to teach the learner something. So there's various different functions that a graphic can play in a course. They can be used to represent things, they can be used to help people memorize, they can be used to show relationships between content much better than just describing it in words. They can be used to show complex content in a visual way, and that is one of the most important things that they do. For example, if you have a line graph or a pie chart, you're going to see straight away as soon as look at it what the message is that is being delivered on that page, much better than if someone described it to you in several paragraphs. And if you then enhance that by, like as Sophie said, by using an infographic or something like that, it's going to be infinitely more meaningful.
And don't forget sort of different learning styles as well. We're appealing to lots of different learning styles. I, for example, respond really well to visual stimuli, so a graphic or a picture is always going to really help me. How would you say sort of your learning style functions, Rosie?
I probably wouldn't be such a visual learner, but even so, when I see, for example, a series of images that are used over and over again to describe the same point in a course, then I instantly remember it much better. It looks like we have got another question. which is, aren't graphics and images key to e-learning? Well, you're right, absolutely, they are.
Oh, I think we've got an answer. Sorry, we thought we had an answer.
Yes, absolutely, they are. And for all the reasons that we just said, they are so useful for helping people to remember things. It is important to remember, I think, though, that they aren't the be-all and end-all. The other day, I did an e-learning course myself, and I have to admit, I would never do this, but I did an e-learning myself online, and it didn't have any graphics in it at all. And I didn't realise that until after I had completed the course. I was so engaged in it that it wasn't until I finished that I was like, hang on, there weren't any graphics in that whatsoever. So there are a lot of other ways of engaging people than just having nice looking graphics and images.
And in our recent white paper that's on this subject, that's been written by Rosie, and I believe that you can download that from our website from tomorrow. In our white paper, Rosie uses a really great metaphor of a wedding cake, and the cake, we start choosing things, and so we put some bows on, and then we put some flowers on, and then we put really ornate icing on, and then, oh, hang on a minute, let's put sprinkles on, and before you know it, the little bride and groom statue at the top has been covered with all manner of other things. And so the really important bit, the really sort of key bit at the top, those two people together who are celebrating their wedding, have been actually covered up with extraneous other bits. And so it's style and substance, it's getting the marry up of those two things. So graphics that mean something and that add benefit rather than just sort of decorative add-ons, if you like.
Exactly. Every graphic is an opportunity for us to teach something, and so that is what we're going to do with every graphic that we put into a course.
Along with graphics, we have interactivity. So those elements that we put into the courses that give the learner the opportunity to interact, to work with the e-learning course itself. And it's very tempting, especially because people come to us having perhaps had negative experiences of e-learning that's been very passive, where they've just had to sit and see screens or not really do very much with the course. So it can be very tempting to say, as we've said here, we need to have an activity every few minutes or the learners will go to sleep. And whilst we understand that, you know, we've got about 7 minutes roughly in current learning theory, I think it is, we've got 7 minutes to engage somebody, to get somebody on board before they start to switch off. However, crowbarring in interactivities for the sake of it may actually be more of a turn off than a learning turn on.
The fact is that we can do better than make sure learners are not going to sleep. Mm-hmm. We can make the interactivity actually serve the purpose of the learning, not just another multiple choice question or true or false question that checks that they're paying attention. So perhaps rather than coming up with lots of memory checking multiple choice questions, which would take you a certain amount of time, you could spend a little bit more time on a much more meaningful scenario or simulation style question that perhaps is a branching scenario and that really makes the learner think about their choices and use what they're learning, trying again to apply it to what they're actually going to be using it for.
And so again, that's giving more autonomy to the learner. It's rather than just assuming or forcing them through a section or a selection of interactivities for interactivity's sake, giving trust, we're giving autonomy, we're believing in the learner to be the masters of their own experience. And ultimately, I always get more out of it when I'm trusted to make my own decisions, rather than feeling that I'm being led down a path that isn't really relevant, or that I'm sort of being forced down.
It is that. It's so easy to kind of divorce an e-learning course from real life, from what you're actually going to be using it for, because it doesn't seem at all like real life. But we can make it as much like real life as possible. And we have a question, which is, what is a branching scenario? It's a good question.
when we choose scenarios within the work that we do, so for example, and I'm going to bring it back to food, guys, I make absolutely no apology about that. Let's go with the cake analogy again, because it seems to be working for us all. So we have, let's say I'm working in a shop that sells cakes, and Rosie comes in and she wants a gluten-free cake. A branching scenario would then provide you with the options that you can choose from. So I can either tell Rosie, of course, madam, we'll make you a gluten-free cake. I could tell her, absolutely not, we don't serve gluten-free cakes here at all. I don't know what you're thinking of, that's a ridiculous request. Or I could say, I'll find out for you and get back to you. Then from those branches, my responses can cause Rosie to experience other responses and then change the scenario slightly. So if I say, yes, of course you can, then Rosie's more likely to have a positive reaction towards me. So it's recreating those sort of sliding doors kind of elements that happen in real life.
One good way of describing it is, I don't know if you read any of those choose your own adventure book stories when you
certainly
were
did. Massive geek, yeah.
But that is sort of what a branching scenario is like. Every answer that you give to a particular question, but usually it's going to be better than a question. It's going to be, what are you going to say to this customer? It's going to be something that gets you right in there, into the scenario. So every question that you answer is going to have a knock-on effect, and so you're going to take a fairly unique path through the scenario, through a series of questions and interactions, and that path will probably be different than any of your colleagues, because they will have taken slightly different paths through the scenario.
It lets the user take the information that they've learned and then apply it to a real life situation, using an example from training, rather than just sort of focusing on cake all the time, giving you something that's a real world application. Although, I mean, cake is a real world application, surely. But it's a customer service scenario. So you have a phone call from a rather angry customer who's sort of shouting and swearing at you. What do you do? And then how you respond can then affect their responses. And so you're taken down a path that shows you how those responses affect both you and other people in that scenario. I hope that's answered that question. It was fairly rambling and full of cake, but hopefully we got there in the end. So we're going to move on now.
Yes, so carrying on with style and substance, we're going to talk a bit about opening animations. And often e-learnings begin with an animation, and often the reason for that is that someone says, let's start with an animation to jazz things up a bit.
Rosie's actually doing jazz hands. We actually had full jazz hands.
You guys are missing out on. So yes, we can start with an animation. Absolutely, that's sometimes a great way to start. But don't start with an animation just to jazz things up a bit, because they can also be incredibly useful for adding learning value, and so they can be used, for example, to set up a scenario that you're then going to follow throughout the course, to maybe introduce you to the characters that you're then going to come to know as you go through, and which become a really important part of the learning. They can also be used, for example, if it's an e-learning that's trying to win hearts and minds. It can be useful to start with an animated story or an anecdote, something that's going to shock people and really grab their attention, because storytelling is so important in e-learning. Starting with an animation is a really great way of getting people into the story to start off with.
And we understand the use of animation. It can be a really powerful tool to convey points in a succinct manner. It's also important to remember that content doesn't immediately become interesting just because it moves around or floats in or disappears. What makes content interesting and engaging is how we relate it to the learner's everyday practice, to their lives, and how they are going to take it and apply it in the future. So again, as well as introductory animations, we have content animations. So as I've just said, it can be a really powerful way of getting across short and snappy messages, no longer than 2 minutes, but we can convey a high level of information in that time without overwhelming them. But it's also important that it's being used for the right reasons. So before you include an animation, think about how you want to include it. What does it need to look and feel like? And remember that animations don't always have to be little characters who come on in the style of cartoons that we're all so familiar with. Animations can show how a process might build up or break down a complicated structure into smaller moving parts to help your learner really get to grips with each individual stage.
So I think an important point there is to not try and replace the training that you want to have with an animation, because animations really do need to be kept short. They are sort of fun, regular type of just click through animation. They are also a fairly passive experience. So if someone's sitting there watching something, however good it is, for more than 2 minutes, it's going to start becoming quite passive, and people aren't going to be interested anymore. And also, it can be very easy to overwhelm people with too much information within an animation. Looks like we've got another question.
I think at Walkgrove, we produce really high quality animation sequences. But as Rosie said, it's always to it's always to add to the learning experience. It's always to sort of augment something that already is in there. It's for a purpose.
So we've got a question here: what sort of cost is a short animation?
And again, this is how long is a piece of string, really. It depends on the kind of look and feel that you want. Fully 3D rendered animation is the higher sort of level of the scale, but it depends how much detail your characters have, how much detail is in the scenario. So it's really about the way that it looks and the resources and time that it's going to take to create it. But if you're interested in having animations created, please feel free to drop us an email with a short brief in, and we can come back to you. The instructional design team can take a look at it from a learning perspective, and we can also give you a breakdown of indicative costs. What we like to do is we like to give you sort of mood boards and that kind of thing, so that you can choose a look and feel that's really going to work for you and your learners, and then we would go from there. I hope that covers that particular point. So I think essentially what we're saying as our overarching theme, once again, is it's about, you can have any of these elements that you want. You can include them in any order and in any manner that you want, as long as we're confident it's going to make the right connection with your audience.
Another thing that's often included sort of as standard in e-learning is audio narration, and often that's included because people say we want to include voiceover for the auditory learners. But we do need to think to ourselves, does audio narration actually serve a purpose here? Because is there an actual learning value in having all of the text that you see in front of you read out at a slower pace than you could actually read it yourself? It's fairly debatable. And including it for accessibility reasons, which is of course an excellent reason to include it, is not actually helpful, because we could provide a text transcript which could be provided for use with a screen reader, and many people who regularly use screen readers actually set them at a faster speed than a human narrator would use, so they would probably turn off the audio narration anyway. But again, we're not saying don't include audio narration, we're just saying that there is a way to use it. One of those ways is to use key points audio. And that can be a lot more effective than just having the whole thing read out. It's important to remember, though, that if you have to wait until the audio has finished speaking before you can move on, you take away that audience autonomy that we've been trying to advocate. we're putting learners no longer in control of their own learning. They can't click forward when they want to. They can't read because they're listening. So yeah, that's something to think about when you're thinking about audio narration. But luckily, there are lots of other ways in which audio voiceover in general can be used.
So rather than just use it to read out everything that's already on the screen, as Rosie said, key points audio can highlight the really important learning messages on a screen, but also click and speak style pages that reveal chunks or sections of narrative or a story. We are at Walkgrove, I'm particularly a fan, and I know that you like to do this as well, Rosie, of using voiceover in scenarios.
Yes.
So a really great voiceover actor can help to bring a scenario to life. So we can, it's often thought that e-learning can be quite passive and emotionless, whereas using a really great audio actor can help to infuse a situation, a scenario with emotion. So something that we've used very recently, an example, was about how to be safe when travelling. And some of the audio scenarios that we used there were stories of people, how they kind of felt when they were unsafe when travelling, and how they responded to it. And they were really quite moving and touching kind of examples. So it can help to give flavour and dynamic to a scenario that otherwise wouldn't have had it.
You can also put the learner in control by having sort of click and speak style pages. For example, if you have a series of clickable characters, maybe these are customer characters, and then you click on each one and they'll tell you kind of what they think about a particular product or what problems they've had with customer service or something like that. But just, you allow the learner to click and listen, and it gives them that bit of control and also brings the learning to life. And similarly, you could produce a podcast where experts discuss the subject, and that's another great kind of supplementary learning aid, something that could maybe be downloaded on a mobile or on an iPod, and learners could listen wherever they are and not just be stuck into that kind of sit at your desk, do the e-learning kind of format.
And don't forget, you can get creative. Audio and animation give you a great opportunity to become creative. So many of us imagine a typical e-learning course as being in a linear style where we click next, we click back, we experience a quiz, we click next, we click back. But several of the things that we've developed in the past, things like an e-learning course that's presented as a sequence of television channels, or a sequence of podcasts or videos. So using audio, using animation, using video even can be done in a different way. So don't feel constrained by traditional forms and templates, if you like. We're very keen to sort of throw the rule book out the window wherever possible. Rosie and I are we like to think of ourselves as revolutionaries where possible.
And yeah, the other thing to remember is that we're not just saying this for the sake of it because we're a bit sick of audio narration. We're not. We love audio narration. We always are trying to think about what the value is for the learners of audio, and audio it can do all the things that we've said in terms of bringing the learning to life, in terms of having that emotional impact, and in terms of helping people to remember things. Because, as we've said, storytelling is so important in e-learning, and having someone read out a story is so memorable, and so much more memorable than just reading and clicking. So our course, and we'll just conclude.
In conclusion, what Rosie and I are trying to advocate for, and what we never apologise for in our role at Walkgrove, is advocating for the learner. Who are they? How are they going to interact with your material? And what's the very best way to get across your message to them? If you want to include elements, we are absolutely delighted to work with you on any element that you want to include in your e-learning course. But if you're out there commissioning e-learning, or you're talking to companies about producing an e-learning course, not only do we want to be asking the right questions, but we also think it's important that we as learning designers are asking the right questions. If we're just going to crowbar in animations and audios and lots of different visual elements just for the sake of it, or to potentially hike up the price of the course that we create for you, then that's not really the right reason to do it. So we're always going to advocate what's going to be best and the inclusion of those elements that are really going to bring your material to life. So I think that's it from Rosie and
Yes, thank you very much for listening.
Yes, thank you. And we'll hand over now to Alan, who's going to lead a small Q&A.
Yeah, hi. Thank you, Sophie and Rosie, and I hope everyone enjoyed that. I think, again, to sum up and say and repeat it over again, is our belief is that, if you are including elements of media or other assets in your course, there needs to be a very good reason for it, and it needs to add value to it. We've had some of the questions, so I don't think there are any real ones outstanding. I think the only thought one had was the difference between engagement and interactivity. Rosie, I'm not sure what your thoughts are on that.
Well, obviously, when we set out to make e-learning, we tried to make it as engaging as possible. But I think when we talk about engagement, we don't just want people to be having fun. If the e-learning is done right, it should be fun. It shouldn't be a deadly boring task. But when we include interactivity in a course, we want to do more than engage. We want to teach, and we want to help people to really apply what they're learning.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And engagement and interactivity, again, is important to remember that they're not always the same thing. People are very tempted to say, let's put an interactivity in here. The learner hasn't been doing anything. They haven't done a drag and drop exercise for a few screens. Let's put that in. And it's important to remember that can actually be more of a turn off than a turn on. So if you feel like you're doing an interactivity for interactivity's sake, it can be very easy to alienate the learner. So what we want is engaging interactivities. So we want to bring those two terms together rather than make them sort of mutually exclusive.
Yes, I think, certainly engaging is one of the most often used words in our business. But thank you for that. And, I think we're just coming up to time. So just a reminder that, yes, the presentation and white paper will both be on our website as of tomorrow. So you can have a look, you can download them. And of course, if there are any questions, please feel free to mail us, and we can always maybe set up a call and have a chat, or if there's any other questions you have, happy to answer them. So thanks very much for joining. I hope everyone found it useful, and see you on the next one.
Thank you very much.